got so distracted. I got to figure out how to put those green room pictures in during the music so everyone can see us dance. Um, Welcome back to another MSP Cyber Roundtable. We've got Frank and Matt from Nodeware today, so welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Matt's just survived hunkering down through the hurricane. Frank, it's just like beautiful weather, like normal out there, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much. Well, we did have some rain the other day, so we're starting up for our rainy season here in Oregon. So, but
well,
didn't have the hurricane 5 inches of rain in a short time. So
yeah.
definitely.
Matt was just regaling how his dog refused to go outside because the water was like up to the dog's elbows. Like,
Yeah, it was up to my
Yeah.
ankles, so dog's like, glad you're out there, you pee.
we're gonna be exploring. Matt, is this your invention? The security pyramid. We're gonna be exploring the security pyramid with Matt a little bit later. Before that, we're going to be talking about today's lecture is going to be on rainbow tables. And before that, guys, for anyone who's just sort of checking in, meeting you guys for the first time, I would love a little bit of like, who are you? Who are these Nodeware guys, right? Like, um, you've been in this adventure for a few years now, right? But where'd you come from before that? Who wants to tell a little story here?
Oh, Frank's older and it's his birthday, so he can go first.
I
Yeah,
forgot that we
thanks.
scheduled this on your birthday.
Yeah, well, it happens once a year. You got to live through it. Um, so just the quick resume, LinkedIn. Basically, I was a longtime hardware guy, right? From way back when I was with Apple Computer, and then I went to I was with Intel for almost 20 years and did some consulting. Did a bit of time at Cinex.
Wait, slow down, Frank. We gotta stop at Intel, okay? Because Intel's gone through like a crazy change the last 5 years, right?
Well,
How does that feel watching it from afar?
it's I've been out 8 years and I still have a lot of good friends, and actually met up with a number of them yesterday that were in their final days of their before their separation. And
Yeah.
it's sad and just a terrible situation. I think not all of it could have been avoided, but a lot of it could have been avoided. And actually, somebody was asking me this morning, sort of, where do you point it back to? And I think back 10 years ago, Brian Kuzanich was the CEO and kind of got distracted by shiny little drones and other things that were, kind of take the eye off the ball a little bit. And honestly, I think a big part of it, I was involved in the channel organization there and did alliances and worked with tons, dozens of vendors and sort of that were supporting the PC industry. And from then to now, the amount of channel presence, channel influence, channel anything from Intel has just gone down. And I'm making, it's not all the issues, but it's a lot of it where the points of influence to the end users, obviously, as we know from the MSP world, their eye off that ball or their disinvestment or uninvestment from the channel, I think, is a big cause of where they're at today. Maybe a little over dramatic, but I think there's a lot to that in what they've stopped doing and stop being relevant is the bottom line, right? I mean,
Well, they've lost
look at
what,
the
like
shows we've been to in the last year, right? Have you seen Intel at any of them?
It's something like 90% of their share volume's fallen off the last few years, right?
Not quite 90%. Their
Not quite
market cap
90.
is about it's less than half than what it was a
Okay.
year ago.
Well, I guess I'm thinking back a few years. So here's the question before let's go into TD Synnex. But wait, last question, hot take: are we excited about this Qualcomm thing or not? I don't know.
I don't know how real that is. I think that's somebody trying to get the stock up a few bucks before they have to sell, because it definitely did that. But I think parts of it could be real. I think if Qualcomm's making as much, they might just buy the foundry part, right? They need the manufacturing, and they could control that. I don't know that they would want all the PC and server business. But we'll
All
see.
right.
So.
Well, I'm sorry to slow down your story, but I've been watching this train wreck happen. And
oh yeah, no, it's been. Luckily, I think I've diversified most of my Intel stock. I think I'm okay, but
All right, so you got out like basically at the best possible time,
Pretty much,
and
yeah.
then and
Yeah,
then
so
over
I spent some.
at
I've been at
TCS.
Cinex a little bit, and I've been. Then I did a bunch of consulting for about 5 years before I kind of joined into IGI and Nodeware, and really, a lot of the transfer of the partners, right? The transition of the partners is followed, or maybe I'm following the transition, or I don't think I'm leading the transition, but being involved in the software and the services and the cybersecurity world has been kind of where I'm at and where I plan to stay. I mean, this is a very valuable product and area of interest, and partners are clamoring for more and more. And we're in a good spot with what we have to offer, and hopefully we'll describe some of that today.
Well, Matt, what about you? Like, so Frank sort of started out in Big Chip, right? And came in through the channel, right? And ended up in this really like exciting security space. What's your origin story, man? Where your superpowers come from?
So I was born in New York City. I was one of two. Oh, I'm kidding. Anyway, I started out, believe it or not, working for a retail location in Boca Raton, selling hardware to very rich people. Started their corporate division and grew that. Ended up at CompUSA running one of their corporate divisions. Then ended up with Pomeroy and Soft Choice selling enterprise accounts, which, as we all know, that was loads of fun selling lots of money, no life whatsoever. And one day I had a recruiter call me and they said, "Hey, got a company that does assessment stuff. Want to talk to them." And I ended up being the first sales manager at Rapid Fire Tools. Helped grow that company over 5 years. Started with 3 reports, ended up with 48 direct. And I've kind of wound my way through the channel, helping companies go to channel, helping companies redo sales, go to market strategies, all that kind of stuff. And I landed at Nodeware after bringing one company to channel that decided after a year that they were like, "Yeah, we don't have the stomach for the channel." And I was doing some consulting work when I got a call and said, "Hey, you want to come help?" So I came to Nodeware about 2 years ago. I was really excited about the product. Actually, I'm still really excited about the product. And Frank and I are yin and yang. I oversee sales and marketing, and other stuff like that, all the channel stuff. Frank oversees partnerships and whatnot. And together, we've really brought this thing forward over the last couple of years. No one knowing who we were to now lots of people knowing who we are.
All right. Well, I won't. I won't make you duke it out for who gets to be Batman and who gets to be Robin. But
Well, again, I am the older one, so I'll take claim on Batman, and his wife's name is Robin, so it kind of fits
Hey,
within
I'm
the
not
household.
wearing tights. That's all I'm saying.
All right, we're gonna talk. We're gonna get really geeky for a second, and then we're gonna get into the security pyramid. Sound good?
Yep.
Sounds good.
All right. So, rainbow tables. We're here to talk about, and this is like one of those funny security terms, like that. The name barely has a connection with the concept, but the idea of a rainbow table is, it's particularly difficult to defeat cryptography, and if you've built solid cryptography and cryptographic practices, it's impossible to break. However, sometimes cryptography is not built to be break proof. Sometimes it's just built to slow down a computation operation. As an example, um, in um, in Bitcoin, we have this concept of mining, and the idea behind mining is simply to create a slow cryptographic operation. The fact that you went through the slow process sort of is considered your proof of work, and you're rewarded for that. But there's other examples of this. So um, in password management, it's been best practice since the 90s, at the very least, to hash a bunch of passwords. And that's so where you have a directory of a bunch of user accounts. Rather than storing the plain text of the passwords, you simply store this one-way cryptographic hash. However, it is possible to brute force those hashes. What that means is if you get a copy of the password file, you can simply run every possible password across those hashes to figure out what everyone's password is. And if you get a hold of a encrypted password file, you can sort of crunch with it and then come back and basically have a list of everyone's passwords, which is defeats the purpose of encrypting the passwords. So to defeat that, we use salts, and the reason we use salts is because of this thing called a rainbow table. Rather than running these cryptographic operations against every possible password for each user, it's possible to actually have a list of every possible hash and the corresponding password. And it's a really big file. If you've got simple cryptography, the really big file could actually fit on a desktop PC these days, right? So if you're using hashing from maybe 10, 20 years ago and you haven't salted those passwords, it's really like an iPad these days can go through that rainbow table, pick out all the passwords, and return them. So that's an example of the use of a rainbow table where we pre-calculated all this cryptography to defeat these one-way hashing algorithms. There's other examples. I'm going to bring up one other example, and this one's actually important today because I think at this point most people are, and just to talk about best practices for a moment, most people are defeating rainbow tables in passwords by using strong salt, and what's called a salt, which means that you add this little extra bit in front of the password that's random. And that way, instead of there being one possible value for each given password, there's many possible values for each given password, which makes the rainbow table increasingly complex. So rather than it being, for example, like a 10 gigabyte file, it would be like a 2 petabyte file or something like that. So salting can help there. There's other things you can do to protect yourself from that type of attack. But I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but if you crawl around the dark web or you go to, for example, a hacking conference like DEF CON, you can actually get a hold of a set of GSM rainbow tables. And what these allow you to do is defeat the cryptography of cell phone networks. So actually, pretty much in any town in the world, run what's called an IMSI cacher that forces people through like basically a jamming process to downgrade their phone's wireless protocol to something that uses an older encryption, and that encryption is so simple that you can defeat it with a set of rainbow tables. So they're still used today. People carry these rainbow tables around. You can use them to just break into people's cell phones and intercept their either their actual traffic on their phone or just figure out who they're calling, etc. Capture the identities of phones in the vicinity. There are things you can do to protect yourself. As an example, if any of you have roaming turned on your phones, really you should turn that off. If you turn off roaming and you turn off 3G fallback or 2G fallback, and you force the phone to stay on that, whatever your cell phone company, stay on their network and keep yourself up at 4G LTE or 5G, you'll actually be able to protect yourself from those types of override devices. So anyway, those are a couple uses of rainbow tables, and that's it for today's security essential.
I want to use rainbow tables to attack my kids' phones. Now I'm excited.
The hardware to intercept phones is like, it's really cheap, man. It is like a craft project.
I was going to say, we're going to talk about this afterwards in a Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's way too simple. I mean, this was cutting edge stuff when the FBI started doing it back in the late 90s. But these days, it's like a little kit off the internet. Yeah. Intercept your friends' cell phones. Of course, it's illegal, but
they're my kids.
Did that stop anything?
I was going to say, they're my kids. I don't care.
All right, so we're here to talk about the security pyramid today, which, Matt, when you told me about this, I was excited. I was like, yes, please. So you've got your pyramid someplace. Can we pull it out and show everyone?
We can. Come on. There we go.
There it is.
You see it
So,
okay?
yeah, so we have Matt's pyramid here, otherwise known as the security pyramid. Tell us about what we're looking at here.
So basically what we found over a lot of time is that people were confused as to, they were always talking about right-a-boom. Well, right-a-boom is reactive. Left-a-boom is making sure that right-a-boom hopefully isn't as intense or as necessary. It's necessary, but not as necessary. So as we talked to hundreds of MSPs, we realized there was a misunderstanding between these particular areas. And these areas take into consideration a lot of different technologies. So it's not just about Nodeware, it's about lots of different stuff. And so if you look at the bottom left where it says proactive, proactive is vulnerability management. It's MFA, it's security awareness training.
Email security.
What's that?
Email security.
Yeah. It's things that you're doing proactively to try to keep them safe. The way I always liken it to, and yes, unfortunately, this is the way I grew up. It's like knowing that my mom's coming over. And so I am cleaning the house, but knowing my mom, I'm cleaning the house in little corners and spots that no one in the world would think about to make sure it's clean. The next thing is testing or proof of security. And most of the time, that's a pen test. Now, pen test and vulnerability management are very different. And the reason why is if vulnerability management is me cleaning my house as spotless as humanly possible, pen testing is my mother coming over and running a white glove over everything. What we're trying to do is we're trying to see if all the proactive measures we've taken are actually fixing stuff. Did they actually fix stuff? Now, the reality is, of course, that pen testing is a point in time measure. So if you will, we now go back to proactive where you continue to make sure that things are upkept and everything. And then you go back over a period of time and you test it again. So those are two things that you're constantly doing, right? You're cleaning the house, you're making sure it's not dirty. You're cleaning the house, you're making sure it's not dirty.
Yeah, Matthew, let me add, before you go to the after effect, let me add one other element or example of this. Like a week ago, I actually had my annual physical, right, with your doctor, and you do tests and you look for blood scores and they tell you what you should be doing to be healthier and lose weight and blah blah blah, right? So that's the proactive, right? You're going in, you're finding out what's there. You may or may not prescribe all those things, but you know that they're there and they need to be done. The penetration testing, the testing is going on that stress test, right? The doctor where you go on the running mill thing and you test your body out and see what, and then you get that report, and then you go back and sort of, okay, if we do this, this, and this, that'll enable that stress test to be better. So kind of the same kind of mentality of how you take care of your body is really kind of a way to be taking care of your business. It's not one or the other. I think, Matthew, you're kind of getting there that, this combination is really the right way to look at security deliverables.
I've been telling this story in more complicated ways for a while, guys. But I particularly like the simplicity here. It's worth noting, though, in addition to this, that the things further left on the triangle are much higher ROI than the things further right.
Absolutely.
And that's a truism. I mean, it is really expensive to clean up after an incident. That's really the thing, right?
Yeah.
Not for you, not just you, but
I mean, the reality is if you're not being proactive as well as reactive, not only are you doing your customers wrong, you're doing you wrong. Because guess what? If your customer gets breached, it's all falling on your head. And you now have to go clean it up. And you may not get paid for it, depending on how things are set up. And
or you might get sued for it.
Well, that's it. Or you might get sued. Or if nothing else, at the end of the day, people are going to know that, guess what? This was my MSP and I got breached. That's what I want all over the place. But the final piece is the reactive piece, right? And that's just as critical because guess what? Going back to my mom, the reality is she's going to call every once in a while and go, hey, babe, I'm in town. I'm coming over. Oh, crap. And you got to go and do stuff to clean up really quickly. And there's only so much you can do. So the reality is reactive, it's EDR and MDR and, all of that other stuff that needs to happen. Because you know what? The reality is no matter how proactive you are, no matter how many times you test, nothing's perfect. Something's going to get through. It's a matter of how big and how intense it is. So it's not, you don't need all of these. You need all of these on an ongoing basis. I mean, again, proactive, backup, testing and proof of security, recovery. I mean, you can pretty much put almost any tool that you buy or look at in one of these three categories. And the reality is, if you're not doing all three, you're again doing a disservice to your customer. But even more importantly, you're doing a disservice to yourself.
Now, there's other things other than, I know you kept it simple there. There's other things in each of these categories, right? So on the proactive, we've got like RMM and hygiene controls. You mentioned multi-factor auth, right?
Yep.
Those type of
awareness training.
Patching,
Also,
awareness training.
Yep.
Just generally hardening things, right?
Yep.
And then up top, in addition to the penetration tests, you've got all sorts of assessments, right? Or measures, security measures, right?
Yep.
That are not related to an attacker having broken in.
Assessing this, making sure that things are in compliance, both the physical and administrative besides just the technical.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that go under each one of these. Of course, I made this, selfishly to explain where Nodeware fits in it. But yeah, I mean, from a standpoint of expanding this, every single tool that an MSP buys or has falls under one of these categories, as well as every single service they offer or should offer falls into one of these categories.
I'm curious, with your partners and like the MSP industry is incredibly diverse. I had no idea until I entered vendor space how diverse the industry really was, right? And there's some MSP coaches out there that'll say like there's one right way, but what I've discovered is there's so many right ways, right? There's a bunch of wrong ways too, but
yep.
You can win with almost any playbook if you're good at the playbook, right?
Exactly. If you commit to the playbook. I mean, it's kind of like I have all these books behind me and people always ask, because I've been in sales for years and years and taught and consulted and all. They're like, which is the methodology used? I'm like, all of them. Well, you can't use all of them. Yeah, I read a lot of books and this piece works for this. This piece works for this kind of stuff.
It's a mashing of best, and it's ultimately what works best for you. I mean, you can't force something on a personality if it's not going to
specific process or platform that's going to absolutely positively for everyone get the same results. And that's to your point. Look, there's a million ways to go about this. The basics are the same, but there's a million things you can do in each one of those basic areas to meet those requirements.
Well, and I see the business side being pretty diverse too. And so I'm curious, when you go and sell these security solutions, right? Yep. If you go into an MSSP that's doing over the top, or you go into a fully managed MSP, or you go into a co-managed MSP that's doing a lot of project work, do you see like people need to start working on the way they're communicating their security value, right?
Yep.
Where are you seeing people succeed the most right now?
Well, first of all, when they're honest, I mean, that's first. Second of all, and I talk about this all the time, when they don't use fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yeah, those days are over, huh?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the quick overview that I learned. I study a lot of psychology, of course, because it's what I do. And what I explain to people is the reality is if you go in and you truly scare someone, actually scare them, not just piss them off, then if I'm really scared, then I'm scared to do anything because then I don't want to do the wrong thing. So what you've done is you've scared me into inaction, not action. Then furthermore, most of the time when you're using that, it's with a new customer. And guess what? You haven't earned my trust. So when now you scared me into inaction, when I am ready to do something, I'm not running to you to take care of it. I'm running to someone I trust. So using FUD, you just basically screwed the whole deal up. What I always tell people is just be honest. Use facts. You use factual information that you can provide, that you can back up. Don't talk technical. Talk from a business standpoint. What would it look like if? How would it feel if? You're not talking about Target or Home Depot or what. You're talking about their business. And one of the things that I just wrote a blog on, and I'm not going to get into all the details to promote the blog, but it's basically, if you're not talking to people about their cyber liability insurance policy and you're not reviewing that regularly, shame on you. There's a huge opportunity there to not use FUD, but to use facts to upsell companies and people that are otherwise arguing with you about cybersecurity.
Yeah, I try really hard to encourage our partners not to sell any cyber solution on the basis of the technical things in the bundle. It's really, what's the risk decision that customer wants to make?
Yep.
Do they want it? How secure do they want to be? Right? How deep do they want their investment to be? How deep do they want their protection to be? Like, what level of surety do they need? Right? And that should determine, and it's really from these categories, right, that we have the pyramid on the screen. How much proactive do we need? How much testing or proof do we need, or evidence? What reactive components are necessary to lead to that level of surety, right?
I'll even take it a step further, which is, and it's finally become popular. I wasn't real popular with this forever. I'll take it a step further. What you're selling when you're selling security is you're selling protection of the company, protection of profits, and protection of people. Okay, protection of people's jobs and stuff like that. That's what you're selling. They don't care what you have in your stack. They won't understand what you have in your stack. What they want to know is, are you going to protect them, keep them up 5 nines, protect their profits, and protect their people? If the answer to that is yes, stop talking. Because if you try to go sell some of these things, do you really want to get into that conversation with a small business owner? Do you really want to try to explain what EDR is and why they should pay extra money? I don't know about you. I've been doing this 25 years and I don't want to do that.
Well, it's
those line items become easy. Well, you know what? Just scratch that one.
It's hard, Matt, because a lot of I think both of our mutual partners out there, or potential partners, right? They have been moving over the last 10 years from really simplified antivirus towards more sophisticated EDR, MDR products that are, they have a lot of comprehensive feature set in there, right?
Yep.
And so people have developed their EDR, MDR, XDR, their playbooks, right? They've developed that message. They've worked really hard on those sales messages. So, I mean, I guess what you're saying is, like, throw that out. First of all, I totally agree. But like, just to be clear, right? Like, that just because it's been working in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah, but
the reality is,
it hasn't.
But people feel like it has.
Yeah,
people
but
feel
I
like it has.
Hundreds of MSP owners regularly that are my friends, and they'll tell me I can't sell more cybersecurity services.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? They think they can't sell more.
Yeah, here's the operative word: sell. You don't sell, they get it. You price it, they get it. It's part of your package for a multitude of reasons. But let's even go to the base of the triangle, meaning in reference to not this pyramid. Guess what? If they get breached, you're getting sued. And nowadays, more and more, even if you have in your contract, it says they're responsible for their cybersecurity. Guess what? You know why that's not holding up anymore? Because, and I don't know what the right legal term is, and I'm not a lawyer, so do not take this as legal advice. But basically, they're looking at it as coercion, and here's why. As a business owner, me saying I'm responsible for my cybersecurity, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's
I
not
have no
reasonable. It's
idea.
not reasonable to expect a small
Yeah.
business owner to make those decisions.
And therefore, by you putting it in and having them sign something saying they're responsible, they don't know what they're signing. When you go skydiving, you know, I'm signing that if I die, it's their fault. That's pretty straightforward. But this isn't straightforward.
You can give that choice to business owners, but you can't explain it in terms of like the 100 points of technology that are in it, right? You have to say, do you want protection against availability disruptions? Do you want protection against potential confidentiality breaches? Do you want protection against, right? Like you talk about it from a business perspective. It's your job to be the translator, right? And
Yep.
you don't let them peel the bundle apart of this intact solution you've engineered that you know is going to achieve their needs, right?
It's a $50, and I'm pulling a number, don't get me wrong. It's $50 a seat. Here's my security protection program. It protects this. And guess what? You're getting it. If you don't want to get it, I'll find another customer. I know that's easy for me to say, but guess what? I know lots of MSPs that are starting to say that because customer gets breached, they're getting sued. They get sued, they're starting to win because it's reasonable to expect that the MSP, based on what they do, is protecting them. And that's all they need for it to be reasonable.
This isn't necessarily like the customer saying, oh man, I feel like it's your fault, right? They're putting in an insurance application, like a claim. They put in a claim.
Yep.
And let me tell you, once they put that claim in, it's out of their hands.
Yep.
Those insurers, if they can pin it on you, they will.
Well, not only that, if they have an insurance document that says, here are the 10 controls that need to be in place, and you don't sit down and have that conversation and they get breached, like you just said, the insurance companies go, your MSP should have had these things in place, should have talked to you about it. Sorry.
Yeah. Or they check the box, right? Because they said,
Right.
oh, I thought my MSP was providing that, right? And hopefully we didn't miscommunicate to our clients. But the reality is they barely understand the things on those applications. And if you didn't fill it out with them, right? If you didn't sit next to them and explain to them what each thing is, right? They're basically checking boxes at random,
Yep.
right?
Again, it's time.
Yeah,
It's time
pretty
for
scary.
just like doctors and lawyers and anybody else that is a professional in their industry, a professional business owner, and someone that has control of significant importance of someone else's business to step up and say, if you're not willing to do the right things, I'm not willing to have you as a client because I can't take that risk. I'm not going to risk my business because of you. And again, I know, Matthew, you don't own a business. You're not an MSP owner. I know. I get it. It's your choice. I'm just telling you what I've seen, what I've heard, and what the ongoing things that are coming down are, that the more you take on clients that aren't willing to protect themselves, the more you're putting yourself in the position of possibly ending up with a lawsuit, multiple lawsuits. You don't need that in your life.
That professionalism angle is that's one of my favorite tunes, by the way, Matt. When I file my taxes, right, it's got my accountant's signature down at the bottom, right? My accountant's basically attesting that a professional prepared this according to best practices. It's a signal to the tax authorities that this guy didn't make up all of this, right? Or at least the tax professional relied on what would be considered a normal, reasonable caution in submitting information, right? And I think that there's an expectation, whether it's and in some cases it's not true, right? Whether it's true or not, that a technology firm, right, should be operating in that way, right? That they should be professionalized. They should be meeting a level of standard. There's things that they should always do. Like you would basically expect, if you go to a CPA, right, they're not gonna like freestyle on your tax forms, right, and get you in trouble like that.
Well, at the end of the day, right, and this is why I don't understand why a bunch of MSP owners don't have this confidence. If you went to your CPA to do your business taxes and they said, I would strongly suggest you do not take that deduction. And you take that deduction anyway, and you get audited. Whose fault is that? Okay. It's your fault, not their fault. They told you. Now, could they still get in trouble for it? Sure. And that's why they should have looked at you and said, if you take that deduction, I'm not going to prepare this. Same thing with a lawyer. Hey, you should probably take this deal because otherwise I think you're going to get a guilty verdict. And then you get the guilty verdict. Whose fault is that? Well, technically it's their fault for not taking the deal, but guess what? It's going to come back on the law firm. So why don't you have the same level of respect for yourself that says, I'm telling you, you need to be secure. I'm doing these things. And if they say no, understand you're considered, whether they treat you like that or not, you're considered just like a CPA or a lawyer or a doctor at this point.
I was about to say, the industry's actually undergoing this transition right now, right? We're professionalizing. There are the White House announced like 2 years ago. I think it was about 2 years ago. With like every 4 years we get a new cyber agenda out of the White House, or every 2 years. Like, so this is not. It's not like this is the only time that there's been a White House pronouncement. But the big flag waving in the latest round of executive orders was actually, we're going to be holding the supply chain accountable, and they named out managed technology service providers as being it's the official position of the U.S. government that we're on notice as service providers, right? Like, we need to professionalize. Yeah. We're going to be held accountable. If we don't professionalize ourselves, they're going to professionalize us, right? Yep. And I think we want to be like, we want to follow what the other professionals in the industry have done, or in the world have done. The doctors, the lawyers, the accountants.
There is. Yeah. There is a group that's the NSITSP, right? National Society of IT Solutions Providers. They're actually in that effort, right, of trying to establish those, and they've come a long way, but it's worse than herding cats, right? It's just a lot of different opinions still.
And some MSPs are fighting it. And I get it. It's not my business. You need the customers to stay in. But I mean, theoretically, I get all that. But if you go down the road the wrong way now, then when it does become absolutely positively, without a doubt, mandatory, you're now going to have to back up to zero and start again. Is that really where you want to go?
So I've heard of that association, Frank. I'm not an insider over there. I've talked to some people over there. I'm in the CompTIA Cybersecurity Trustmark program. We're helping manage that program from a success perspective. They've got a couple hundred providers signed up to do this thing already, or maybe more at this point.
Yeah.
Which, it's a drop in the bucket when you think about the tens of thousands around the world, but it's an important, influential camp.
Yeah. And the scale on that is a hard score, right? I mean, just getting beyond those first few hundred. So I think ultimately it becomes a combination of different models, right? I mean, there's different standards. There's NIST, there's NIST, CIS, there's FTC safeguards. So there are going to be, from a regulation standpoint, there's those variations, and some of them may just depend on the vertical, right? And the
CompTIA's, and I have a little bit of inside information that I'm happy to share with the whole planet. CompTIA doesn't do lobbying. There was a period of time some years ago where they did lobbying.
They did.
They don't do lobbying now, but they are in a lot of rooms and they are talking with a lot of people. And the feedback from our government, and governments actually globally, because CompTIA is an international organization, is, hey, this Trustmark thing, that sounds like just the type of thing that we've been thinking about implementing in XYZ country, right? So there are legislators and bureaucrats around the world. They're doing rulemaking right now, and not that they're naming like Trustmark, right? But they're looking at programs like that set a bar for professionalization, and they say, you know what? If you're below this bar, you don't have a safe harbor. If you're above this bar, the government is going to say that you're performing as a professional, and like where the rubber really hits meets the road is in those like Matt, you were talking about those insurance situations, right? Well, guess what? All those insurance claims are regulated by the local governments, right? If the local governments say that you're at best practice, right? You're professionalized, right? You're doing well, right? And so we all need to try to head that direction. But so I want to go back to the triangle because I want to get a little more specific here. Balancing the stack, right? So what do you think people have like some, and I want to talk about vulnerability management, but I want to talk about some other things. What do you think people have overspent on, and what do you think they've underspent on generally?
Oh, I think they definitely underspent on vulnerability management. I think they underspend on security awareness training. I definitely think they overspend on EDR, MDR because it seems they've got every kind of DR they can possibly get. And the reality is, a lot of those vendors have multiple products in there. So they're buying this one for that, but they also have that. And they're buying the. So, what I find is a lot of them
Yeah.
are overbuying in the reactive side and underbuying in a lot of cases in the proactive side. But there's a reason
Exactly.
for that. Proactive is hard because you actually have to get your customers to buy into it. And, security awareness training is one of them where, like, when I talk about this is just part of your stack, you can't literally force someone to take those. You can get your CEO on board and tell them if they don't take it, they're going to be docked, pay, or fired, but you can't force them. So the proactive side in general, I think, is something that's underspent on. And I think the reactive side is overspent on. And to be honest, I even think the testing, the assessment side, the pen testing side is underspent on.
Absolutely. That's clearly. I mean, we've been doing a lot of this. So our company, right, sister company, does the services and pen testing as an example, and a lot of them they're just doing that, and companies need that against checkoff item once a year, kind of end of the year type of thing. So that's been sort of an isolated tool, and then vulnerability assessments have been kind of in the past been the checkoff item, right? And I think that's really much more moving to the management, right? The proactive looking at devices, fixing them, remediating, patching, et cetera. So being much more interactive. And there's a lot of misunderstanding between the pen testing and vulnerability. In our case, in our statement is that you really need to do both, right? Because you can't test once a year for exploits and try to see where you can get in. But the proactive play, and part of that is the MFA and other things, but really the vulnerability assessments and ongoing management is where you continuously improve, right? And again, kind of going back to the insurance requirements, they're not wanting you to just check a box once a year. They're wanting you to continue sort of continuous insurability, right, as a thing. And that's sort of that combination of where this, it's not one or the other.
I
it's
don't
a combination.
do we don't do penetration testing in Fort Mesa. We're aligned with partners, but we do assessments, and I personally do assessments, and I support providers in building out their vulnerability management practices, but I also use vulnerability scanners, and I support them in developing those practices. And the vulnerability data is super interesting because when you perform when you walk through the steps that are part of a vulnerability management program, and you go a little bit beyond just scanning, right? And I'm talking about what the standards say about vulnerability management, right? It's not that many steps actually, but when you walk through that process, you unearth not just like some flaws that you didn't know about in software. You actually unearth a lot of practical issues with the underlying IT operations thing.
Or just devices that you didn't know were on the network that
Yeah,
are wide open.
you find devices that you didn't know were there. You find some people still like are using licenses of like Adobe and Microsoft Office, that these perpetual licenses from like 8 or 10 years ago. They're still running them, right? You find like that some of the users have been given admin access and they're like playing video games on their machines. You find like it's like the tip of the iceberg. You find the vulnerabilities, but then you say, well, why do these vulnerabilities exist, right? And you unearth all these other security problems, right? And so it's a really great intelligence tool. What else? So the vulnerability management is underspent. The EDR is overspent. You know what? One of the things I've noticed in EDR is, and I'm lumping in EDR, MDR, et cetera, into that. I guess it's a triangle. I get to do that, right?
Yep.
I'm lumping them in together. When you look at the security standards, which by the way, I love CIS controls. I eat and breathe 20 different standards, but I love CIS controls because they block specific attacks. Which is really great because when you look at the practices, you can say these things block real attacks, right? Not theoretical attacks, real attacks. And when you look at the section of CIS controls that talks about the parts of EDR and MDR that are actually blocking the attacks, it's actually like, it's only like 2 out of 10 of the features on your feature card, right? Like these EDR, MDR vendors are selling like all these features, all these capabilities, but then you look at what's actually blocking the attacks, and it's actually like, it's just a few things.
Yep.
It's like, is there an agent? Is it running? Is it getting updates? Right? It's like basically it. A couple other things, and then they throw in all these other features that aren't even on like an attack defense matrix, right? And then there's all this incident response stuff that people are supposed to be doing that they're not doing because they spent money on EDR, MDR. They say we got that covered, so they don't have their contact lists. They haven't rehearsed any of their incident response plans.
Yep.
They don't have a forensics on file. Like they don't have a forensics team like prepared.
Policies, procedures, GRC stuff.
Yeah. So they're missing all of those things they actually need to react because they've overspent on MDR or EDR.
I
Right?
got it for you. You know, it's another underspent category that seems really simple. Frank, agree or disagree, is email security. And when I say email security, I'm not talking about antivirus or whatever. I'm talking about true email security. You know, like a mail protector, or there's several out there. Yeah.
Inky.
I mean, I really think people ignore that as a core part of their stack, you know, that quote unquote an automatic thing. And I'm not sure why.
Well, I think probably because Microsoft's probably oversold a bit of the quarantine and Defender and different things that say they're kind of email or their Office 365, but they're not going as deep as some of like a Mail Protector, Inky, some of these other guys are really doing. And so, I've got it covered. I got it included in my business.
Just to be clear, the things that are missing, I've got a few ideas of what people think they have email security covered, but they don't have a data classification software that's looking at the data that's going out through email and saying, wait, that doesn't go out without encryption, right? Or that doesn't go out at all, right?
Yep.
So that's frequently missing. And so when you ask a question to your customer, like, okay, so can you tell me what you're doing to stop your employees from emailing sensitive data out into the world? You know, and you get a head scratch.
Yep.
Right? It's like
we're coming in.
We just tell them not to do it.
Yeah. It's a lot of inward protections and not the outward protections. I'll tell you another thing that I've been getting really. So my iPhone's in lockdown mode because I'm freaked out about browser security, and I'm freaked out that I could just be like reading the news and like thinking like I'm not doing any risky behavior, but I use the internet, I use the web, I open web browsers, I read news articles, right? Which is like something people don't typically feel guilty about, but there's injection payloads like targeting you. And I got hit twice this week. And because I'm in lockdown mode, the thing won't execute, right? What happens is it just looks like a file you can download, right? And I'm like, oh, I just got hit by like malvertising, right? And I'm thinking people don't have these protections in place, you know? And they think they're covered because they have EDR, MDR software.
Right.
And there are products out there for protecting this, right? We've been doing URL whitelisting and domain whitelisting for a long time. But if you're not blocking all of the ad networks, there's this route. And there's some really cool software. Cloudflare sells a product. There's some other companies selling products that actually they render the web pages in the cloud. they strip out all the objects and potential attack code, and then they repaint the web page and beam it to your device in a safe way. And people are way underinvested in that kind of stuff, because that's how the attacks are coming in, through the web browser, through the email.
Yeah. No, exactly. So, I mean, it kind of goes back to this whole triangle point then, right? I mean, if you can be more proactive, right, you are setting up the MFA, the email security vulnerability. You're looking for the things that those other attacks are, taking advantage of. Then you're going to reduce the risk of your customers and the need for some of these. I mean, again, you're never going to not need these reactive tools, right? They're going to have to be part of your stack forever, but you can reduce the
yeah, I mean, you make a good point, because if you look
need.
at email security from the way we're talking about it, what we just talked about is proactive. Defender in the quarantine is reactive. So the question becomes, what do you want? Do you want to just be reactive, or do you want to be proactive to eliminate problems before they happen, i.e. sending out stuff that you shouldn't be sending out, whatever the case may be. Because the other thing is, and this is an opinion, this isn't any kind of a fact. My opinion is that you're reactive if you do it right. You should not be having to deal with that every day. Hopefully, if you do it right, you're not dealing with your EDR, your MDR, your recovery, anything like that on a regular basis. Now,
yeah, I mean, Matt, I go into some partners and they get really excited about their EDR MDR panel, and they open up the pane of glass, and it's just like red critical like incidents all over the place, and they're like, yeah, the product's taking care of itself. And I'm like, did you investigate that one? Did you investigate that one? You can't investigate all of them if you're not stopping most of them up front.
Right. No, I mean, and that's the reality. And that's why I said, to me, is reactive necessary? 1,000,000%. There is nothing on this triangle that you shouldn't have. But the idea would be is that your reactive shouldn't have to be overloaded constantly.
All right, so I'm having trouble, because this is a triangle and it's a very stable object. I'm having trouble like picturing a stack. People usually think of like products all stacked up. That's the way I think of it.
Yep.
Well, you can do that.
Have you guys heard of that stack and high, let them fly like thing in manufacturing world? You guys heard of that?
Yep.
That's like what I always think of.
Well, the other way to look at this, Matthew, might be kind of, again, sort of the progression of left
Yeah,
of doing
I like
right
that spectrum better.
Right.
Oh, be quiet. I like my little dude.
Well, no, you have a left, right. That's good. That's good. So what? Okay, some quick takeaways, guy, and then I think we get to let everyone enjoy their beer o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, I'll start in the Matt.
The reality is, to have a complete security stack, you have to be proactive. You have to make sure you test or assess your proactivity to make sure it's actually doing something. And just in case something gets through, you have to have reactive. Next thing, stop trying to sell cybersecurity to people who don't understand. Stop trying to sell it because all they're going to do is argue with you on price, and they don't understand what you're doing. Remember, security is not about protecting them. It's about 5 nines with their company, and it's about protecting people and profits. That's all business owners really care about. Is my company going to stay up all the time? And are you going to protect my profitability and my people so I don't have to lay them off, or, whatever else the case may be? And the final thing is, make sure that as you look at your stack, you're not doubling up on tons of tools. Because sometimes when people look at this and go, oh my God, I got to be proactive and reactive and I got to test, they think I got to have 50 tools. You do not have to have 50 tools. You just have to have the right tools. Now, what are those? I'm not going to say, because there are lots of cool tools on the marketplace, partner of ours, some we haven't partnered with yet and everything. But just be smart and don't overbuy stuff. So now your stack is so expensive that you've priced yourself out of putting it out to your customers.
So I want that to be my takeaway, Matt. So the like how much have you already put in your security bundle is a really like um critical consideration. I give our partners the guidance that their tool envelope should be about a third of their advanced security bundle, and their people should be 2/3. Like you don't like you said, you don't need a huge pile of tools. You need the right tools. You may even own some of the right tools already, and you only need one or two. But you do need to figure out how to get your people to do all of the things. How do you be proactive with your people? How do you test and measure with your people? How do you be reactive with your people? Um, but I think back to the point of like, there's that envelope, there's that price elasticity that the customer is going to accept. There is a limit where people tap out, right? Even with the best message. I would say my takeaway for the day is look at your security stack. Do you have an equal spread over this triangle? Because it should be pretty equal. Like you should have stuff left, right, and center here. And if you're finding that you're like 2/3, 3/4 over on the React side, you're just wasting a bunch of money, really. Or to put it another way, you're not doing a very good job protecting your customer. Like those security dollars aren't being well spent.
And again,
So,
I'll say you're not doing a very good job of protecting yourself.
yeah.
I mean,
All right, Frank, you got one?
Well, I was just going to reiterate a little bit on the distinction between vulnerability, just the whole proactive place, right? And there's different levels of proactivity, and that's where we focus and think it's, as we said, it's underspent, and the requirements for it are coming if they're not already in your vertical space that you're selling to. So I just recommend everybody kind of take another look at it, understand what it means to be proactive, and what are the tests and third party stuff, right? You can't, and the thing with the testing, the penetration testing, right? It's not something you can do yourself, right? It has to be an outsourced third party to be real, right? And be taken seriously. So yeah, you'll probably provide some contact information for us later if people want to hear some more or talk about it. We'd love to. Well, both of them.
You could click
That's
these
true.
guys. They're on the event page. Yeah, I mean
Thanks, Matt.
the third party assessment is it's important. It's important in providing credibility to bring in that. The reality is if you're the one running all of IT, right? And you're the one deciding what security should happen, and you're the one, like, basically you're doing everything, right? You're an insider at that point, right? You're no longer really equipped to have an outside look, right? And so bringing those outside measures in is really important. I've got one more takeaway I'm going to add before we get out of here. So first of all, I love that triangle because there's only 3 categories. I used to love the NIST 5 functions, but people, like, honestly, people never remember all 5 functions. They're like, they forget recover, or they forget identify. And then NIST went and added a 6th function. And I'm like, oh, great. No one's going to remember any of these anymore. So I'm feeling it going down to 3. I feel good about that.
Good.
All right, guys.
Hey.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for coming, guys. I gotta tell people what to expect next week, and I'm ill prepared because I didn't click on the thing. Okay, so next week we're doing. This is actually great. So we're doing application security testing next week, and we're going to compare it to enterprise penetration testing. We're going to talk about the difference between application security, general IT penetration testing. We're bringing Teddy Guzek from Hoplite Consulting in to be the expert panel on that. So join us next week if you wanna learn more about the testing part of this pyramid. And until then, everyone, stay safe.